Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to dive in.
Always up for a good deep dive.
Today we're really going to get into socioeconomic inequality.
Yeah, it's a big one. And important, obviously, but also kind of complex.
Definitely. We've got a whole stack of research papers, books, all that good stuff. But don't worry, we'll make it fun.
Like a knowledge treasure hunt.
Exactly.
Hmm.
So, before we get into the nitty-gritty, I want to share this quote that really hit me. It's from the new human rights movement. It says, "Poverty is artificial and contrived." Like, it's not just a given. It's a direct result of the systems we've built.
Right. And that's exactly why we use the term socioeconomic. It emphasizes that connection between, well, everything, the economics, the social outcomes, how it all ties together.
It's all connected.
Exactly. It's like you can't just look at one part of the engine. You need to see how the whole thing works or doesn't. That whole systems thinking thing.
So true. Okay, so systems thinking. Help us understand that a little better.
Sure. It's like instead of just treating a symptom, you're looking for the root cause, right? You're trying to understand the whole picture, all those interconnected parts.
Because if you don't,
You might miss the bigger picture. Like, you might think you're fixing something, but you're actually just putting a Band-Aid on a much larger problem.
okay, so that makes sense. But how does that apply to something like inequality, which is, let's be honest, a pretty massive issue?
It's huge.
Yeah.
But that's exactly why systems thinking is so important here. Because it helps us see those hidden connections, the ways different aspects of inequality, like, say, access to education or healthcare, are all linked. It's not just about individual circumstances, it's about the systems that create those circumstances.
Well, we're talking about systems, but those systems, they affect real people, right?
Yeah.
Like in their daily lives. And some of this research we found is kind of mind-blowing. It shows just how deeply inequality can impact us.
Oh, absolutely. One area that's a prime example is health. There's this common assumption that, well, more money equals better health.
Right, makes sense on the surface.
Right. But it's way more complicated than that. Like, I was reading this NBER study. They looked at a basic income program, and get this, they found no major improvement in physical health, even with that extra income.
Wait, really? That's kind of shocking. I mean, you figure that financial security would reduce stress, and then bam, better health, right?
You'd think so. But it shows that other things are at play here. Like, what about access to healthcare, quality food, even just like the environment you live in?
It's all connected.
Exactly. Just throwing money at the problem isn't some magic solution.
Makes you think about that saying, health is wealth. Maybe it's the other way around, you know? Your wealth determines your health.
Bingo. And it's not just our bodies either. Our minds are affected too. The University of Warwick did this study, found that chronic stress from living in poverty, well, it can actually lower cognitive function.
Like literally make you think less clearly.
It's wild, right? They said it's like a 13-point drop in IQ.
13 points. Seriously. That's a huge difference. Imagine all that potential being wasted, all those dreams put on hold just because of money, you know?
Yeah.
That's heartbreaking.
It really is, and it creates this awful cycle. Poverty leads to stress, stress messes with your brain, and then that makes it even harder to escape poverty. It's like this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Ugh, it's so frustrating. Okay, so we've got to talk about technology too, because that feels like a huge factor in all of this. On one hand, it seems like there's so much potential, right? To like solve problems, create opportunities, but then there's that risk of it just making inequality even worse.
Totally.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword. Like
Right.
in the Zero Marginal Cost Society, Jeremy Rifkin talks about how tech, like renewable energy, 3D printing, that stuff could actually lead to abundance. Like imagine if scarcity wasn't even a thing anymore.
That sounds kind of utopian, doesn't it?
Right. Limitless clean energy, everyone making what they need. Pretty wild thought. But Rifkin, he's also realistic. He says we can't just be blindly optimistic about tech.
Because?
Well, the systems we have now, the ones that benefit from scarcity and inequality, they could easily get in the way, right? Even if we have all this amazing technology, that doesn't mean it'll reach everyone equally.
It's like inventing the future isn't enough. We have to make sure it's accessible to everyone.
100%. And that means addressing the root causes of inequality, not just the symptoms. We can't just focus on the tech itself. We have to look at the social and economic structures that are holding us back.
And those structures, those systems, they don't just shape our world, right? They shape our minds too. Like even the way we think about ourselves, our values, it's all connected to these larger systems.
Absolutely. There's this fascinating study mentioned in the Zeitgeist movement defined. They looked at what happened in Fiji when Western TV was introduced.
Okay, what happened?
Well, it actually led to some pretty significant changes in how the islanders viewed themselves. Their self-esteem, their aspirations, it all shifted.
Wow, just from watching TV, it makes you wonder how much of our own behavior, even our desires, are influenced by the media we consume, right? Like all those messages we're bombarded with every single day.
It's definitely something to think about. This study was just one example, but it highlights how susceptible we are to those outside influences, especially when it comes to how we see ourselves and what we think will make us happy.
And that ties into this whole idea of relative deprivation, right? It's in the new human rights movement. The idea that we're constantly comparing ourselves to others, even when we have more than enough.
Right. It's like our sense of well-being isn't just about what we have, but what we have compared to others. And that can lead to this constant feeling of dissatisfaction, even when our own lives are objectively pretty good.
It's that whole keeping up with the Joneses mentality.
Yeah.
Like no matter how much you have, there's always someone with more.
Yeah.
And that fuels this endless cycle of wanting, wanting, wanting.
Exactly. And that's kind of the engine that drives consumerism. It's this feeling of never having enough, always needing more to be happy. But the thing is, that kind of thinking, it can be incredibly damaging both to us as individuals and to society as a whole.
It's interesting, though, because some people might argue that this drive, this competition, it's just human nature, right? That inequality is just an inevitable part of the human experience.
That's a common argument for sure. But the new human rights movement really challenges that assumption. Like, the book digs into theories like social dominance orientation, which basically suggests that this tendency towards hierarchy, towards inequality, it might not be hardwired into our DNA.
So it's not that we're born with this need to create hierarchies. It's more like we've learned it, internalized it from the systems we're born into.
Exactly. It's a powerful counter-narrative to the whole "it's just human nature" argument. It suggests that maybe, just maybe, if we change the systems, we can change ourselves. And if that's true, well, that opens up some pretty incredible possibilities for creating a more just and equitable world.
It's a lot to take in, honestly. Makes you wonder, where do we even go from here? Like, if inequality isn't just, inevitable, does that mean we can actually change things?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Mm.
The good news is, the stuff we've been reading, it offers some pretty hopeful possibilities.
Okay, I like hopeful. Give me some hope here.
All right, so both the Zeitgeist movement define and the Zero Marginal Cost Society, they talk about how technology, it could completely transform our relationship with scarcity.
It's like what we were saying earlier about vertical farms, 3D printing, all that.
Exactly. A major, like renewable energies everywhere, foods run locally, everyone can basically make what they need. We're not talking about some distant future either. This stuff is possible now.
It's like we have the tools to build a better future. We just got to actually do it. But, and this is the big but, we've also talked about how technology can backfire, right? Make inequality even worse if we're not careful.
For sure. And that's why the new human rights movement and the Zeitgeist movement, they both stress this point. It's like, we got to shift our values, like fundamentally. That whole scarcity mindset, that dog-eat-dog mentality, we got to move beyond that.
So it's not enough to just invent cool gadgets. We have to actually think about how they'll be used, who they'll benefit.
100%. It's about, like, choosing collaboration over competition, putting people and the planet first, not just profits.
That's huge. But it also feels kind of, I don't know, impossible sometimes. Like, how do we even start to make those kinds of changes when the systems in place are so powerful?
It's definitely not easy, but I think it starts with awareness, right? Like recognizing the ways these systems operate, both out there in the world, but also within ourselves. The new human rights movement really emphasizes critical thinking, questioning the stories we've been told, especially the ones that keep the status quo in place.
And maybe being a little more honest with ourselves about our own roles in all of this, right? Like how we might be contributing to the problem, even unintentionally.
Exactly. It's about personal accountability, for sure. Recognizing how we might be caught up in consumerism or that, need for more, more, more. And it's about asking ourselves some tough questions like, am I okay with this? What am I willing to do to change it?
Because we all have a role to play, right?
Mm.
We can't just sit back and wait for someone else to fix it. There's this quote from the new human rights movement. It asks, to what extent are any or all of us responsible for the unnecessary suffering of others? That one really got me thinking.
Yeah, that's a powerful one. It's a good reminder that we're all connected and that our choices, our actions, they have ripple effects.
Definitely something to chew on. Well, on that note, I think we've given everyone a lot to think about today.
We've only just scratched the surface, to be honest.
Seriously. If you're feeling inspired to learn more, definitely check out the source material. We'll link to everything in the show notes. And in the meantime, keep those brains buzzing, keep asking those tough questions, and let's keep working towards a better future. Until next time.
See you next time.